Hey everybody, HomeSliceHenry here, and today I'm entering a Pokemon Go tournament to try and earn some respect for a Pokemon that I feel is very strong in the current meta. Now this Pokemon Go tournament is being hosted online, and the competition has some pretty big names, including a former international champion and a former regional champion. The format, of course, is a Show 6 Pick 3 style tournament, but before the tournament starts, I'm gonna need a team. I could just slap together 6 random Pokemon and call it a day, but I really want to do well in this tournament, so I'm going to be taking my time with the team building process. As a battler, I really like identifying meta trends, like top meta picks, and finding something interesting to core break them. So after taking a look at the day 2 usage from the most regional tournament in Gdansk, something major stood out. The top 2 usage, Azumarill at 83%, Ariados at 75%, and nothing else above 50%. And here's where the first team member enters the field of play, and that is Forretress. Forretress is a bug steel Pokemon with the moveset of Volt Switch, Rock Tomb, and Earthquake. And Forretress completely walls all the charge moves from Ariados, and it resists Ice Beam and Play Rough from Azumarill. Combine that with guaranteed debuffs from Rock Tomb, and you have a spicy Pokemon that can take down 2 of the top meta contenders. Forretress, due to its bug steel typing, cannot deal with fires whatsoever, so with my next 2 additions to the team, I'm going to cover for that weakness. And that is Shadow Quagsire and Shadow Feraligatr. Both have terrific pacing, they can output a lot of damage as well, and they prove to be very flexible up energy. So now that we have half the team, I'm going to look to try and support these water types as best as I can. My goal is to build a team where it's so difficult to run grass types that I can freely use the waters and the Forretress that supports them. So, for the remainder of the team, I added Shadow Drapion, which not only beats the grass types, but also has a water move for the fires, Galarian Moltres, and Ariados. So, I locked in the team and prepared for the tournament. However, when the tournament was about to start, I began to have some doubts, and that was specifically about the weakness of the team towards Machamp and Pangoro. So I ended up asking a fellow content creator, Though Technical, and he agreed that facing fighters with this team would be nearly impossible. I debated switching an Air/Skarmory for the Galarian Moltres, but he ended up recommending that I actually bench Feraligatr. However, if I bring in a fighting resist in that slot, I still need to cover against fires, so he recommended the Water Fairy type Azumarill. Azumarill is not a favorite Pokemon of mine, but Tho's a very good battler, so I took his recommendation and set the team. The round 1 pairings are revealed, and I am in trouble. I'm going up against Yatharth, who's running Shadow Dragonite, Shadow Feraligatr, Chestnut, Carbink, Poliwrath, and Clodsire. The problem here is Chestnut. I built my team with 4 Pokemon that could defeat grass types, but Chestnut actually has positive matchups against the Forretress, against the Galarian Moltres, and is a complete wall to the charge moves from the Drapion. I was covering for the main grass types, but I forgot about Chestnut, and that's going to be a huge issue here, as I really have to rely on Ariados to try and catch that Chestnut off guard, because without it, Chestnut has play into just about anything that I can bring. So I decide the best bet for game number 1 is to lock in Ariados on the lead. And the Ariados lead in game number 1 is met with Shadow Dragonite Disaster Strikes. I am going to look to farm up some energy, save switch into the Azumarill, and I'm able to bait out the Chestnut. Azumarill is able to survive a Frenzy Plant and can output some pretty nice damage onto the Chestnut. Chestnut lands the Frenzy Plant, that does so much damage, and I will return fire with the Play Rough. Play Rough will hit for a massive super effective damage. The thought process behind the line was that I could lure out the Chestnut, and then hopefully my Drapion could do well in the back, as my Drapion does have a lot of neutral play if it can dodge the Poliwrath. Here they're going to go for the superpower. I've taken so much damage already on this Ariados. I will look to apply a debuff onto the Dragonite before I switch. So I fire off the lunge, Dragonite is going to no shield, in comes the Shadow Drapion, and even though they're debuffed, a Dragon Claw would still do a lot of damage, so I'm forced to commit the shield. In the back is Feraligatr. This is a Pokemon that Drapion can typically beat. However, I am down a shield, and being down a shield, I'm in a tremendous amount of trouble. My opponent is going to fire off the Hydro Cannon, grabbing my final shield. I make it to the crunch. This will be grabbing their final shield, and I need to try and go for a catch here onto the Ariados. I get the catch. That is going to be step number 1. So I get the catch, Ariados gets KO'd, back in comes the Drapion, Drapion gets to the crunch, but now my opponent gets the catch onto the Dragonite, crunch KOs, and they can just win it with Feraligatr. So the alignment was tough, I made a catch, but my opponent got the catch right back. And now in this best of 3 series, I need to win 2 in a row. And considering how weak I am to the Chestnut, it's going to be a tall ask. Game 2, I'm leading the Forretress, and I lead into Chestnut. My energy is completely walled here. So, even though I am a Bug Steel type going up against a Grass type, this matchup is honestly not comfortable. They're going to go for a Superpower. I'm going to look to farm up a ton of energy. In comes Clodsire, and I fire off the Earthquake. What I should do here is Earthquake, then go Drapion, but the moment I click Azumarill, I realize I've made a fatal mistake. This is my opponent's plan, and I'm falling for it. They're using Clodsire to bait out the Azumarill to let Dragonite sweep me in the endgame. So now, my back is majorly against the wall here. I'm able to KO the Clodsire, but I need to save the Azumarill for the Dragonite. If I just brought in Drapion, I would have been fine. I fire off an Ice Beam at the Chestnut. Chestnut can survive it, but it will do quite a lot of damage. I pivot into the Drapion, and there it is. That's what I was afraid of. It's the Dragonite in the back. If I just went Drapion into that Clodsire, I would have been in a good spot. I get the defense drop, so a bit of good luck does go my way, but that doesn't mean I'm going to be able to farm down. And I can't even make it to 2 Aqua Tails here. I'm forced to just go for the crunch, as I would faint before I make the next move. So my opponent is going to get that farm down. They are heavily debuffed. I send in the Forretress here just because my thought process was I can get ahead on energy, but they have so much energy stored on this Chestnut. Chestnut snipes me down with a Superpower. In comes Azumarill. Azumarill is going to get knocked out. And I start off the tournament with a 2-0 loss as Chestnut just absolutely destroys me. For round number 2, unfortunately, the footage did get corrupted. I was going up against a pretty spicy team with a Breloom, which has the exact same problematic typing as Chestnut. However, thanks to a well-positioned Shadow Drapion, I was able to get a 2-0 win, and now we move to round number 3 versus LSH188, who's running a Alolan Sandslash, Galarian Moltres, Feraligatr, Azumarill, Gastrodon, and Ariados. So my opponent is running 3 water types and then 3 Pokemon that resist grass. So this will be a bit of a polarizing matchup. For match number 1, I decide to lead the Forretress, and it pays off as I lead into the Galarian Moltres. Forretress hitting for super effective damage with the Volt Switches and the Rock Tombs. This is only an Ancient Power, so I am going to No Shield. Ancient Power, not going to be too much of a problem. I immediately fire off the Rock Tomb. Let's get some damage and a debuff. The Rock Tomb is going to land. Opponent just let themselves get farmed down. They bring in Gastrodon. I'm going to pivot into Quagsire. Opponent switches into Alolan Sandslash, and this game is over. My opponent must be making the read that it's the Azumarill in the back and I'm running a double water team, but it's not. It's the Moltres. If it was the Azumarill, then the Gastrodon would still have very good play in the back, but against the Moltres, this Gastrodon is going to be doing less than nothing. My opponent ends up shielding. They've gotten themselves very, very low on the Sandslash. Ice Punch will KO. In comes the Forretress. They send in the Gastrodon, and now it is Moltres time. So the opponent made a read. Unfortunately, the prediction was not the correct one. They're going to go for a double resisted Earth Power. I'm going to farm up as much as I can before unleashing the Brave Bird. Brave Bird is going to be shielded by the Gastrodon. Gastrodon going to fire off the Body Slam, but with shields to hide behind, Moltres is just absolutely overwhelming here, firing off the Ancient Power. This is resisted, but it's about just getting them as low as possible here. I send in the Forretress, go for the Rock Tomb. It doesn't matter which mon it lands on. Either way, it's going to be winning. In comes the Gastrodon. I Volt Switch down, and I'm able to take that game. If my opponent wants to rely on Sandslash, then I will make a slight adjustment to my team. I'm actually going to bench the Moltres and bring out Azumarill as the final Pokemon. Leads are set, and it's the same as Game 1. Moltres going up against the Forretress, a great lead for me. Forretress, these Volt Switches do add up quite a bit. Opponent just going for the Ancient Power. This game, I think about it, and I decide to shield. And I believe that is actually a misplay. If I can have something that's a guaranteed ancient power, I should let that through, because that's a lot less threatening than a Brave Bird. Whereas now my opponent is going to match shields, they're going to make it to a Brave Bird, and now I'm forced to actually double shield in what is technically a winning lead. My opponent is going to switch out into Gastrodon, and unfortunately I benched the Moltres. I don't have that Moltres to hard counter that Gastrodon safe switch. Instead, I'm forced to bring in Azumarill. Earth Power lands, that deals significant damage. I'm farming up and firing off the Play Rough. Play Rough will do some pretty solid damage to the Gastrodon. Gastrodon will have to full send an Earth Power here, as a Body Slam would not be enough to knock out. Gastrodon is going to fire off the Earth Power. There goes its energy. I'm going to bring in the Quagsire. Quagsire farming up, going to be hit with a Body Slam from the Gastrodon. There is still the very low health Moltres lurking as well, and it is going to be the Sand Slash. I farm up a ton of energy with the Quagsire. If I can just get the shield, I have an Earthquake banked. Aqua Tail does a ton of damage. I'm firing off Aqua Tail number 2 to grab the shield. Opponent makes a brilliant play. They let it go, and I should have just caught there. I should have just thrown away the energy on the Forretress, because while I have so much energy on the Forretress is going to struggle to get to 2 moves versus the Gastrodon. They saved the Gastrodon. I can fire off the Rock Tomb, but unfortunately, I'm just going to get outpaced here because the Gastrodon is on the 3 cycle. They make the Body Slam, and unfortunately, by a very narrow margin, I will lose game number 2. For me, game 2 felt winnable. I just didn't execute the lead as well as I should have. I'm going to trust in Forretress, but this time I'm going to put it in the back with an Azumarill lead, and we pick up an amazing lead Azumarill into the Alolan Sandslash. Alolan Sandslash is on Powder Snow, which means it has very little fast move pressure. My charge moves are going to be resisted here, but due to the fact that the bubble damage adds up quite a bit, this is a favorable matchup for the Azumarill. And I have the Forretress and the Galarian Moltres in the back. So the thought process behind the line was definitely just, if I have an ability to win the lead, that's great, because Moltres Forretress is a very strong core. If I can't win the lead, then I am just going to try for Moltres Energy. And here that Drill Run is not going to KO. I have a very bulky XL Azumarill. I withstand the damage and grab a shield with the Play Rough. Now I can send in Forretress. I do want to just absorb energy on the Forretress, and then I can try and get Moltres Energy a bit later on. So the Drill Run is going to connect. I'm going to continue to look for the farm down, getting the farm down and exiting with energy. In comes Gastrodon in the back. We have the battle of the Moltres, and I'm going to strike first with an Ancient Power. This is super effective, but it does not one-shot, but I wanted to throw first to deny my opponent an ability to get a full sneak. So I will commit the shield. Moltres going for an Ancient Power. Neither one of us getting the boost, which is very good. I'm going for another Ancient Power, and they have taken quite a bit of Sucker Punch damage already. The Ancient Power still not going to be enough to knock out, however, as they make it to a move, and I'm going to be double shielding because I can get this energy advantage versus the Gastrodon. In comes the Gastrodon. Gastrodon, unfortunately, Body Slam is just not going to cut it here. The Body Slam, Moltres withstands the damage, makes it to the Brave Bird, and this Brave Bird is going to inflict devastating damage onto the Gastrodon. In comes the Moltres. We Sucker Punch down, and we move to 2 wins, 1 loss in the tournament. Next up, round number 4 versus Pokemon Master GTB, who's running a team with Serperior, Feraligatr, Dunsparce, Azumarill, Shadow Alolan Sandslash, and Clodsire. Right off the bat, I love the look of Quagsire here. Quagsire looks amazingly strong if it can avoid Serperior. And because of that, my opponent will probably feel pressured to run Serperior. So my game plan is to run Quagsire and 2 Pokemon that do very well into the Serperior. Something like, let's say, Quagsire, Drapion, and Ariados. So I lock that in for game 1, and we get an amazing lead, leading the Quagsire into the Dunsparce. Opponent is going to save switch into Feraligatr, and I will stay in this matchup to start with and just tank a move. The reason being is I'm expecting its Serperior in the back. So I can handle that Dunsparce no problem with my Drapion as long as I have 2 shields. I just want to get some value out of that Quagsire first, and now I can send in the Drapion. Drapion is going to be committing the shield as they go for the Hydro Cannon. I'm going to look to farm up and then fire off the Crunch. Crunch should be enough to pick up the knockout here onto the Feraligatr, and it barely does. In comes the Dunsparce, but I have a sizable energy advantage with the Drapion. And if I'm predicting the line right and it's Superior in the back, then I just have Ariados on Superior, which is a strictly winning endgame for me. They're going to go for the drill run, that's fine by me. I'm going to be firing off the Crunch. Crunch will be able to pick up the knockout. Opponent is going to commit the shield. I switch into the Quagsire and get the catch. So we get some value out of the Quagsire early on by forcing a shield, and now I get a catch on it as well. I'm going to overfarm to the max and play to the CMP tie here, denying their drill run with a perfectly timed Aqua Tail. And in the back, we got the team read right. It is Superior. So we're just going to get to win here. My opponent, the Quagsire, is too strong. They felt pressured to bring the Superior, so we run a backline that just allows it zero place to go, and we can bring in the Ariados, and Ariados is going to get to the Lunge, and Lunge will very comfortably knock out. Superior fires off the Aerial Ace, but that's just not enough. It's super effective damage, but Ariados shrugs that off, fires off the Lunge, and takes game 1. I think running strong to Superior will be the key to victory. So I'm going to run Drapion lead with Moltres in the back and bench the Quagsire for Azumarill, as it can do a little bit better into Superior, but it's not going to see the Superior as we catch it on the lead with the Drapion, and things are off to an amazing start. I fire off the Crunch. Crunch is going to be shielded up, and my opponent is going to return fire. This line was a little bit ABA weak to the Alolan Sandslash, but if that happened, I would have felt pretty okay. Here, they save switch Azumarill. I bank so much energy on the Drapion, and I bring in my own. So now I have a ton of energy, and the energy is guaranteed to be valuable because the only thing they have on their team that walls energy from Drapion is the Azumarill. So now I can just bring in my Azumarill to neutralize theirs, and even if they do have something like an Alolan Sandslash in the back, I just have so much energy on that Drapion that I should still be in a winning position. I'm farming up quite a lot of energy with my Azumarill, playing to the CMP tie, which I do not win. Again, I have a very high rank Azumarill. Play Rough will not KO. Shout out to those IVs. I fire off the Play Rough. It KOs them after one additional bubble, and I'm able to win that matchup. And in the back, it is the Sandslash. This is what I was worried about. I have Moltres, but with the energy lead that I have on Drapion, this should still be winning for me. I can Sucker Punch this into a range where I can then knock them out. They send in Superior as I fire off the Ancient Power, so that's a pretty decent catch by them, but the issue for them is that they can't knock me out of the sky here with one move. I can survive whatever they throw. Frenzy Plant, Aerial Ace, it's not going to matter. I'm able to get them deep into the red, and now the fun is about to begin because we saved all the energy on Drapion from earlier in the game, and we get to use it here, and we're going to switch out, and we just have so much loaded energy. My only lose con is going for an Aqua Tail. I just build up to the back-to-back crunches. So I fire off the Crunch at the Alolan Sandslash. Opponent is going to shield, hoping that I didn't have the back-to-back, but I just stored way too much energy. Drapion KOs the Sandslash. We get the 2-0 win, and we're now 3 wins, 1 loss in this tournament. The next match will be against Tiger Sony, who's running Superior, Gastrodon, Dunsparce, Clodsire, Dugong, and Ariados. I do really like the look of Shadow Drapion against this team, as long as it can avoid the Gastrodon, it is very nice play even against Dunsparce. The line that I'm going to run is actually Shadow Drapion, Shadow Quagsire, and Ariados. It sounds scary to save switch a Quagsire into a Superior team, but if they're leading Gastrodon, which is the only bad lead, they can't have Superior in the back or they would auto lose to a Moltres lead. So I lock it in, we don't see the Gastrodon on the lead, but instead we are met with a Dunsparce. Dunsparce farming up quite a bit of energy. This is not great for my Drapion, but it's also not terrible. I can survive a drill run here, but it does a lot of damage, and especially after the Crunch debuff, I'm very happy to stay in. My opponent is going to save switch into Gastrodon, and now I get to respond with Ariados. Ariados builds up past the Trailblaze, and I'm baiting with the Lunge. Lunge is going to be shielded, and now my opponent's damage is a lot less threatening, and I should be able to make a Trailblaze. So they're actually running Water Pulse on the Gastrodon, so Water Pulse does mean they're slightly better into Moltres, but still not good. I make it to a second Lunge, expecting the shield, but they actually call the bait. Honestly, even if it was Trailblaze, the play makes sense because if they double shield and I have a Moltres in the back to farm them down, then they just lose. So the play does make sense. They are going to go for the Water Pulse. I'm going to farm up a lot with the Quagsire, and here's where I just completely fumble. I forgot that Quagsire loses cap to Gastrodon. Granted, that's not a lot of damage that I take, but it's still a pretty big mental error. Aqua Tail is going to pick up the knockout. It's going to be Superior in the back. Back in comes the Dunsparce, and unfortunately, I can't make the double crunch before they make it to their drill run. I fire off the Aqua Tail, as now this should be Aqua Tail plus farm down range, so the Aqua Tail is going to connect, and I will get a farm down. Back in comes Superior. Superior going to get met with a crunch instantly. This game is going to come down to, can Quagsire make a Stone Edge? If the answer is yes, then I'm going to be able to win it. Here, I will go for the bait. The bait does work as I get the shield. They're going to be firing off their energy, and now it's going to be a race. Can Quagsire make it to the Stone Edge? And we fall agonizingly short. Man, if I just didn't take that body slam mid-game, I would have had the health to get there. That was a winnable game, and it was entirely my fault that I lost. Those sometimes can be the most discouraging losses, where if I played better, I just win, but unfortunately, I made a crucial mistake and it cost me the game. I have won 3 rounds in a row, and I did not come this far just to lose in round 5, so I'm going to need to clutch up in this next match. I lead Moltres, but it's the Dunsparce lead again, and this is not off to a good start. I'm going to farm up 7, switch into a Azumarill, and get the catch and the sneak. Rock Slide is the inefficient move to throw against Azumarill, so I make them use their energy inefficiently, and on top of that, I save a bunch of energy on Moltres. Out comes Clodsire, and Clodsire is going to be taking super effective damage from the Bubbles and the Ice Beam, so this is honestly not bad. I felt like Drapion was so good last time, so I do have it in the back. The thought process was, if they had the Gastro, hopefully I could lure it out with the Azumarill safe switch, so the fact that they didn't bring it in makes me feel pretty good about this spot. My opponent ends up shielding. I went for an undercharge there in case they let it through, but they do end up shielding, and they will go for the Sludge Bomb. I have the energy on the Moltres. I am going to actually go for a farm down here. Sludge Bomb, not going to KO. I just want energy on the Moltres, and I believe I should get the full Sucker Punch farm down, and I do. That's massive. In comes the Dunsparce. Dunsparce going to be immediately met with a Brave Bird. Brave Bird is going to be shielded. I now have a 2-0 shield advantage in the back. They have Gastrodon, no! And this is not what I was hoping to see. But I have a 2-0 shield advantage. And Crunch is going to do so much damage here. Opponent trying to maximize the Mud Slaps. I make it to another Crunch. Crunch is going to knock out the Gastrodon. Back in comes the Dunsparce. And I'm just in a winning position in this game. Drill Run is going to be shielded. My opponent is going to get to another move, but I can just shield up. I won't even need the extra energy that I have on the Moltres, as I will make it to a Crunch. And thankfully, we play a lot cleaner this time. We fix our mistakes from last game, and we're going to a decisive game number 3. We were able to get the win in game number 2, but if the shield advantage wasn't mine, I could have lost that. It's too risky. I'm going to switch up the team and bench Drapion for Ariados, which can actually beat Gastrodon. For game 3, we get the lead. Moltres into Gastrodon, opponent safe switches into Dugong, and I am going to stay in here a little bit with the Moltres to fire off an Ancient Power to fish for some serious damage or a shield. Opponent lets that through. I can now bring in Ariados. And the nice thing here is Ariados will outpace, so they end up going for the Drill Run, which does more damage, but of course does mean that they don't get a debuff. But now I get to pick up a knockout onto the Dugong, and I still have the health available that if they bring in Gastrodon, I can force a shield with a boosted move. They are going to send in the Gastrodon. My opponent, they already no-shielded one lunge. I am not going to let them do it again. I'm going to fire off a Trailblaze. This will guarantee the shield from the opponent, as they will get a big farm down. Now this is the Water Pulse Gastrodon, so I will actually have to cover for that, as Water Pulse will do a lot of damage here. I shield at the last second, and I get the call right. In the back is Dunsparce, and it's Dunsparce versus Azumarill. So overall, this is a pretty neutral matchup. The thing I will have to be careful of is the potential for Gastrodon to get a big energy head start. That would be catastrophic, as Water Pulse can actually damage the Moltres. Play Rough is going to land. They have the pacing advantage, but they just don't do a lot of damage since their moves don't get same type attack bonus. Dunsparce is going to fire off a Drill Run. I go for an Ice Beam here just because it is ever so slightly cheaper. The Ice Beam is going to be shielded up by the opponent. They're farming up a lot. In comes the Gastrodon. I bring in the Moltres. Moltres just cannot make it to the Brave Bird. This is enough energy for the Water Pulse. I think about it, I shield, and I get it right. That's massive. I'm now going to look to farm to 100 energy. Opponent fires off a Body Slam, but that's fine. Body Slam is not going to be lethal here. I'm just going to Sucker Punch them into Ancient Power range because at 100 energy, you can hold an Ancient Power plus a Brave Bird. So Ancient Power KOs that Gastrodon, and we have the Brave Bird locked and loaded. So Moltres gets its revenge, knocks out the Dunsparce, and we're now 4 wins and 1 loss going into the final round of the tournament. And my final opponent is Ficht, who's running Superior, Gastrodon, Shadow Drifblim, Shadow Alolan Sandslash, Galarian Moltres, and Azumarill. Versus this team, this is the kind of team why I brought Forretress. So I'm leading it, and I pick up a good lead into the Shadow Alolan Sandslash. Forretress does win the 2's straight Rock Tomb, so it's unlikely my opponent is going to want to double shield this lead, just because that's not a winning matchup for them. This matchup is such that they're practically always going to be bringing Gastrodon because it's basically the one thing they have that can reliably deal with the Forretress. So in the back, I can safely assume it's going to be Gastrodon and it's going to be something else that is weak to Forretress. I decided to double shield. I'm committing to Forretress, build up to the Quake, and I'm baiting with the Rock Tomb. The Rock Tomb is going to be no shielded. Opponent throws 1, they switch into Gastrodon, and I get to respond with the Moltres. But as soon as I do, I'm suddenly worried. This could potentially be a Moltres bait out. And if it is, then I could be in trouble that I brought in the Moltres and I didn't bring in the Ariados, because Ariados also does well here. So immediately after I made that switch, I was suddenly not feeling great about my positioning. I will fire off this Brave Bird. Brave Bird is going to pick up the knockout. Opponent, are they going to send in the 3rd here, or will we see the Sandslash? My clock's up. I can switch out. It's their own Moltres in the back. And since I didn't bring the Ariados onto the Gastrodon, this now feels like a losing endgame for me. I'm going to need to make a good catch. Back in comes the Sandslash. Sandslash going to be firing off an Ice Punch. It will not KO. I get the farm down, but I'm too low. I get farmed down. And this game is going to come down to a catch. If I catch a Brave Bird, I can win this game. Or if they Ancient Power me instead of Brave Birding, I can win. They wait the turn, they go for the Brave Bird. I don't get the catch, but I have stored energy on the Moltres, and I make the Ancient Power. The opponent avoided the catch, but they threw a bit too early. Ancient Power KOs the Moltres, and we're able to get a Game 1 win. For Game 2, I'm sticking with Moltres Forretress Core. It's so strong into his team, but I'm going to lead the Moltres. I'll use Azumarill as a safe swap. It seems risky against a team with Superior, but I have 4 anti-grasses, so Superior should be pretty tough for him to bring. So I've locked in the team, Moltres on the lead, into Sandslash, Disaster Strikes. I'm going to look to bank a little bit of energy because Moltres is very powerful, but his pacing is not great, and I bring in Azumarill. Opponent throws energy, which is honestly great. They're going to chip me with a Drill Run. They're going to look to farm back up energy, and there's the Gastrodon. So a tough start, but we're able to lure out the Gastrodon, and that means that I should have a pretty good matchup for Forretress in the back. I'm firing off Play Rough after Play Rough at this Gastrodon. I go for a slight undercharge here as my opponent is going to be returning fire with their energy. My opponent goes for a Body Slam bait. I was hoping they would just go for the Earth Power and just knock me out, and that way I could get Moltres farm. That's why I undercharged. But instead, I'm the one who lives on 1 HP, and that's actually worse because now the Sandslash gets farmed. I'm going to bring in the Forretress, but I'm so far behind in terms of energy. They're going to fire off a Drill Run. I'm going to let it go, but they're already at another move, and I'm forced to commit a shield. This is really not good. This is a winning matchup for Forretress, but they're so far ahead that now this is a decidedly negative matchup. I fire off the Rock Tomb. They're going to commit the shield. I throw 1. I wait the turn to try for a catch, but the catch attempt is unsuccessful. It's Moltres versus Moltres, and I only see 1 win con. The full send of the Brave Bird. Brave Bird lands massive damage, but just not enough to KO. Opponent barely hangs on as they make the Ancient Power, and they pressure that final shield. Back in comes the Sandslash. Sandslash is going to be able to pick up a knockout with an Ice Punch, and it's all up to Forretress. Can Forretress get this farm down? No, it cannot. Sandslash makes the Drill Run. Their energy management in that game 2 was amazing, and now we're going to a winner-take-all game number 3. For game 3, I'm making a slight adjustment. I'm bringing Shadow Drapion. It's on the lead, and it's going up against the Sandslash. I'm going to look to bank energy on the Drapion. The biggest thing I noticed between game 2 and 3 is how good Drapion energy is into his team. I make a catch of an Ice Punch bait. That is a massive catch for me. I'm going to look to farm up a bunch of energy, and my opponent is staying to fire off their energy here. So they will go for the Drill Run. They're now going to switch into the Gastrodon. This time, not really a Pokemon that I'm looking to bait out, but in reality, if they can KO me with some health remaining, that would actually be great because I'm going to get an insane amount of Moltres farm. Gastrodon fires off their energy, Earth Power picks up the KO, and right away, I don't wait the clock. I send in the Moltres, and I just want farm. If they're going to bring Gastrodon into the Azumarill, I'm going to punish that decision, as now I get so much farm on the Moltres, and this energy lead is absolutely overwhelming to any Pokemon on his team. He brings in the Sand Slash. Let's guarantee a shield or massive damage with a Brave Bird. Brave Bird does get shielded. The switch to the Drapion, and it's his own Moltres in the back. And now with this energy advantage and a resistance to Sucker Punch, I am just in a completely won position. Aqua Tail after Aqua Tail being launched at the Moltres. Moltres now deep into the red. They're going to return fire with the Ancient Power, but I can just shield, farm down, and comfortably take the win. So I'm farming with the Drapion, but then a mental error. The tournament had been going on for a couple hours. I miscount. I thought I had to throw. I didn't. And now this game might slip out of reach. Crunch into the Sand Slash is going to be shielded. I switch into the Moltres, but there's still a win con. I can just Sucker Punch this into Aqua Tail range. I shield. This is going to force my opponent's energy as they can't let me get to the Ancient Power. And now from here, I can just win with an Aqua Tail. And that's all the energy the Sand Slash had. So I get to the Aqua Tail, and despite the miscount, we are going to be able to take the series 2-1. And after losing round 1 in the tournament, we end with a final score of 5 wins and 1 loss. Taking a look at the tournament results, the 5 wins and 1 loss was good enough for 3rd place. The 2nd place team also had 5 wins and 1 loss, and the winner was SS Thorn, who was running a pretty unique team with Como-O and Araquanid, as he went a perfect 6-0. So overall, I had a ton of fun with this tournament. And I am looking to host more tournaments in the future, especially after the Annihilate Calm Day once the meta shifts once again. So keep an eye out for a community post in the future. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you're enjoying the content and if you enjoyed the bit of the detailed breakdown of how I built this Show 6 team, make sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't. And a special thank you as always to our members here on YouTube. The support guys provide is sincerely appreciated. So thank you guys oh so very much. And until next time, I've been HomeSliceHenry.